When my homeowners association HOA transformed my inherited storage facility into a community dumping ground, I uncovered a corrupt scheme that had been siphoning funds from residents for years. What would you do if you discovered your neighbors were exploiting your goodwill to mask their embezzlement? My wife, Emily, nearly choked on her coffee when I showed her the will. The lawyer's letter felt substantial in my hands. Uncle Henry had bequeathed me his storage facility on Oakwood Lane, just beyond our Willow Creek neighborhood. It's strange, I admitted, still grappling with the news. It's that little warehouse with the red roof we pass on the way to the store. Emily wiped coffee from her chin. Well, that's unexpected. What do you plan to do with it? I sighed, studying the property photos. It wasn't large, about 5,000 square feet, with 20 units, a small office, and a chain-link fence. It needed paint and likely a new roof, but Uncle Henry had kept it in decent shape. Sell it, I suppose. We could finally afford that bathroom remodel you've wanted. Emily tilted her head, thoughtful. Or you could keep it. People always need storage. I might prove why to steady income. Before I could reply, the doorbell rang. I opened it to find Susan Harper, the HOA president, standing on our porch. Her neatly styled brunette hair was untouched by the wind, and her reputation for knowing everyone's business preceded her. James, I heard about your inheritance. How thrilling, she said, her smile bright but insincere. May I come in? 10 minutes later, she sat at our kitchen table, cradling a mug of tea. The timing is perfect, she enthused. The HOA has been struggling to store seasonal decorations and equipment. The shed behind the clubhouse is deteriorating. That's unfortunate, I replied warily. We've been SAVing for a new storage solution, but construction costs are exorbitant, she continued, leaning forward. Would you consider letting the HOA use a small section of your property? It would benefit the community greatly. I glanced at Emily, who shrugged. It seemed reasonable. I suppose I could reserve one unit for HOA use, just until I decide what to do with the place, I offered. Susan clapped her hands. Wonderful. Let's start with a 3-month arrangement. I'll have Mark bring a formal agreement tomorrow. After she left, Emily raised an eyebrow. That was kind of you. It's just one unit out of 20, and it's temporary, I said. What's the worst that could happen? 3 days later, I drove to the facility to clear out Uncle Henry's belongings. As I turned onto Oakwood Lane, I slammed on the brakes. The property was swarming with cars and trucks, people unloading furniture, boxes, and even a boat. I parked and waded through the crowd. Susan stood in the center, clipboard in hand, directing the chaos like an air traffic controller. Susan, what's happening? I shouted over the noise. She turned, beaming. James, isn't this great? I shared our arrangement, and the community is so appreciative. Our arrangement was for one unit for HOA equipment, I said, watching in disbelief as Mr. Larson rolled a motorcycle into Unit 6. Well, yes, technically, she replied, but at the emergency board meeting, everyone got excited. We realized this could solve so many storage issues for residents. My jaw dropped. You can't just, she cut me off. The Millers are MOVing next month and need temporary storage. The Thompsons are renovating their basement, and the Larsons needed a spot for their summer vehicles. I saw her husband, Mark, backing his truck toward the entrance, loaded with patio furniture and what looked like an old arcade game. Wait, this isn't what we agreed to, I said firmly. I need everyone to stop. Susan lowered her voice, gripping my arm. The board voted unanimously yesterday to amend the bylaws. All common-use facilities must be accessible to paying members. Since you've designated this a community resource, everyone has equal rights to it. She handed me a document titled Bylaw Amendment 47.3, Community Storage Access. This can't be legal, I stammered. I own this property. It's not even within HOA boundaries. Actually, the property line falls 8 feet inside our jurisdiction, she said sweetly. Mark verified it with county maps. I looked around helplessly. Mrs. Chun was arranging holiday decorations in Unit 12. The high school football coach was stacking gear in Unit 15, and handwritten name labels marked nearly every door. You need to stop this now, I insisted. I never agreed to let the whole neighborhood use my property for free. Susan's smile tightened. James, you're causing a scene. Think about how this looks revoking a generous offer after people have started MOVing and isn't very neighborly. Several onlookers, including Lisa Carter, our street's self-appointed rule enforcer, who'd cited me twice for late holiday light removal, watched intently. Is there an issue? Lisa asked, arms crossed. I've already cleared my attic for new shelf wiring. You can't back out now. Trapped under 20 pairs of eyes, I relented. We'll discuss this later, I said quietly, but this isn't what I agreed to. Susan patted my shoulder. We'll talk soon. Now, could you help the Parkers with their antique dresser? It's going into Unit 8. I returned to my car, amendment papers in hand, stunned that my small gesture had spiraled into a free-for-all. Driving home. My phone pinged with an email, the Willow Creek Community Newsletter, sent to all 245 households. The headline read, Local homeowner donates storage facility to community grand opening today. My name topped the first paragraph, claiming I'd generously offered unlimited storage access in a heartwarming act of unity. I pulled over, hands trembling. In 4 days, a misunderstanding had become a disaster. How could I challenge the entire HOA? What were my rights? Why did I feel targeted by a calculated takeover? A week later, I arrived at the facility to find new padlocks on every unit locks I couldn't open. Sorry, James, Lisa Carter said, startling me as she organized bins in what was once Uncle Henry's office. We had to change the locks after a report of suspicious activity last night. Suspicious activity? This is my property, I exclaimed. Who authorized this? The HOA Security Committee, she replied, not looking up. Don't worry, Susan will get you a master key eventually. I took a deep breath. Lisa, this has gone too far. I offered 1 unit for temporary HOA use, not a donation. She faced me, hands on hips. That's not what the newsletter said or what Susan announced at the meeting. Are you calling our president a liar? My phone rang me, boss, asking why I'd missed a meeting. I left, vowing to resolve this later, but by afternoon, the parking lot was packed again with neighbors unloading more items. A hand-painted sign, Willow Creek Community Storage, now hung over Uncle Henry's old sign. I helped Mrs. Shin with a heavy box. Thank you, James, she said. My husband's golf club's redoing our attic. Mrs. Shin, there's been a misunderstanding, I said gently. I didn't agree to this. Her face fell. But the newsletter said, I know, but it's not true, I interrupted. Susan didn't ask me to open the whole facility. She looked puzzled. She showed us paperwork with your signature. My stomach dropped. What paperwork? It had the HOA logo, something about donating the property for community use. It said you were proud to honor your uncle's legacy. Uncle Henry, a reclusive man who'd once scared off kids with a broom, wasn't the community service type. I thanked her and drove to Susan's house, fury mounting. She wasn't home, but Mark was trimming their pristine lawn. Your wife forged my signature, I said bluntly. I need to speak with her. His smile faded. That's a bold claim. It's illegal, I shot back. Where is she? Board meeting at the clubhouse, he said coldly. But I'd watch your words. Illegal is a strong accusation. Is that a threat? He restarted his mower. Just neighborly advice. At the clubhouse, the meeting was ending. Susan locked up as I approached. We need to talk about the fraudulent document with my forged signature, I said quietly. Fraudulent? I don't understand, she replied, stepping around me. I blocked her. Mrs. Shin saw it paperwork claiming I donated the facility. Her smile faltered briefly before returning. There's a misunderstanding. I showed everyone the amended bylaws and the agreement you signed. I never signed anything, I insisted. That's not how I recall it, she said, checking her watch. I'm late for dinner. Submit your concerns for the next meeting. As she left, my neighbor Paul approached. Everything okay? No, I admitted. They've stolen my property and claim I donated it. Paul glanced around. You're not the first. The Browns lost their boat parking spot last year the same way HOA claimed it violat some obscure rule. How do they get away with it? People don't fight, he shrugged. It's costly, and Susan ensures dissenters face consequences. What kind? The Browns got daily fine shrub height, trash can placement until they caved. A chill settled in. Susan had the HOA's legal fund. I'd be fighting alone. At home, I found my trash cans tipped over, a violation notice taped to my door, improper garbage storage, due law 50 fine. More notices follow 6 in one day, from unapproved planters to excessive birdhouses, totaling due law 350. This isn't coincidence, Emily said, pale. It's Susan showing us what happens when we resist. We'll find out why they want that facility, I vowed. Uncle Henry kept detailed records. I bet they'll reveal the truth about my property lines. Little did I know, those records would unravel Willow Creek's power structure entirely. Nobody takes what's mine, I muttered, storming into the county clerk's office with my deed. The clerk, a gray-haired woman named Margaret, looked up. Someone stole my storage building, I blurted. She raised an eyebrow. Stole a building? That's a new one. Sit down and explain. For an hour, I laid out my documents: Uncle Henry's will, the deed, the HOA amendment, the newsletter. They can't seize your property with a rule change, Margaret said, tapping my deed. That's like me claiming your house because I made a rule. She pulled up property maps. Your facility isn't even in their jurisdiction. It's 12 feet outside their boundary. My jaw dropped. They have no authority? None, she confirmed, printing the map. And here's more. The county cited the HOA 3 times last year for improper equipment storage. They face hefty fines unless they resolve it by next Tuesday. Armed with this, I consulted my friend Carlos, a real estate attorney. He drafted a cease and desist letter. This should stop them, he said. If not, we'll get a restraining order. At the next HOA meeting, I arrived early. Susan tapped her gavel. First item, signage for the new community storage facility. Excuse me, I interrupted, standing. I'd like to discuss that. Her smile stiffened. James, glad you're here. We were discussing your donation signage. Perfect timing, I replied, placing the boundary map on the table. My facility is 12 feet outside HOA boundaries. I had it surveyed. County records confirm it. Lisa stood. Impossible checked. Did you? I countered, presenting another document. The HO faces a due law $110,000 fine for storage violations by next Tuesday. The room bust. You plan to take my property to dodge that fine, I said, holding up an email. This quote for a due law $48,000 storage building is dated the day before Susan approached me. Neighbors gasped. Susan banged her gavel. Order. We have an agreement. No, we don't, I replied, sliding Carlos's letter forward. My attorney disagrees. Remove your items by this weekend. Applause broke out as Susan adjourned the meeting, her face flushed. Paul warned me later, Susan doesn't lose well. Her husband's in city planning. TVE got pull. I began documenting everything: photos, measurements, bracing for retaliation. At 6:17 a.m., a chainsaw woke me. Outside, workers in yellow vests were felling my cherished maple tree. Stop, I yelled, rushing out in pajamas. HOA emergency removal order, a worker said, handing me a report signed by Susan, claiming root damage. This tree was healthy last spring. I called Emily at work. They're cutting our maple, your revenge. By the time I confronted Susan, it was a stump. Safety issues, she said smugly. And your fence is 6 inches too tall, expect a notice. Fines piled up: fence height, mailbox design, bird feeders due law 455 in days. Paul got 6 violations after questioning Susan. The Browns faced fines over their award-winning roses. We fight together, I told Emily. Over dinner with Paul and the Browns, retired lawyer Edward Brown revealed HOA financial discrepancies: due law $85,000 for a playground still broken, payments to Mark's brother-in-law's firm. This is criminal fraud, Edward said. We'll expose it. Paul suggested a trap: pretend to yield, then catch them hiding Eve Whitedanke. With hidden cameras and a public meeting, we did just that, revealing their corruption to all of Willow Creek. 2 months later, my facility became the Pine Grove Community Center, not HOA-owned, but a nonprofit for all. Volunteers, including a remorseful Lisa, transformed it. An anonymous due law $112,000 check from Mark funded 20 maple saplings, replanted where Susan had struck. As neighbors worked together, healing began. One person standing up can fix what's broken, Paul said. Not one, I corrected. All of us. Sometimes, the greatest donation isn't property, but the courage to say enough. 7,992 characters.